I'm curious, like, what's the journey? I mean, you premiered at Hot Docs last year in Toronto. I'm sure you've talked about this movie a lot now, but do you want to give, the winter 2023 version of how this movie came to be?
Oh, geez. I feel like the movie kind of shows how it came to be in a way. Like, geez. Jason?
Well, I guess, how I got involved was I met Reid when I was 5 years old, and we grew up around the corner from each other in North Seattle. And yeah, I knew the Harkness family. Everybody that you saw in the film, I knew as a child growing up. And Reid and I kind of separately became filmmakers in our adult lives, and we reconnected back when I guess Reid was still shooting this film, obviously, but back right after they'd found Joyce, I think we reconnected. And in 2015, I officially came on board with the project. So I've been involved for 8 years now. But I mean, in answer to your question, yeah, we world premiered at Hot Docs, and we're now 1.5 years into the release of the movie. We've toured it all around the world to film festivals, and then we did a theatrical release of the film along with an impact campaign in April. In May, we aired on Independent Lens. In June, we launched on VOD, and in November, we launched on the Criterion channel for streaming. And now we're doing an awards push with the film. So that's but Reid can
I'll give you a quick inception. Like basically, as a young person, I had seen Michael Dapted's Up series, whatever iteration it was at, and I thought, that was a pretty cool idea, and I'd also just been really fascinated by Truffaut and other filmmakers that were doing movies about coming of age, and I thought it would be really interesting to see like real-time growth, and I didn't exactly know how that was going to play out, but I had a starting point.
There's a scene in the movie where you kind of stand up in front of your family and you sort of struggle to talk about why it's so meaningful to go on this journey, right? And why it was so meaningful to have found Joyce. You're now a father of 4. Part of what this film is sort of grasping at is searching for, like, how do we be a parent, and how do we be a family? And what are some of the things that you've thought about since making the film, or do you have any sort of like wisdom that you've stumbled upon?
I don't always watch the movie. I just sometimes will like go out to dinner and not watch, but I watched it tonight. This is a beautiful screening room, and I felt a lot of the parts. It's strange. Sometimes I watch it and I'm like, okay, I'm really like aware of the maker's mark, and the kind of like the part of like, that's me holding the camera, that's me in that uncomfortable situation. But this time I watched it more as like a movie, and was just like, okay, and now that character is, and is a little bit of a separatism, but yeah, it's the wisdom that I've gotten, as a parent. I think it boils down to connection. It's just like the simplest way to look at life is just like, either you have connection or you don't. And I think what's happening in this movie is both. I think that we see, a very extreme bit of disconnection, and then we see other layers of connection that are happening at the same time. And I think that, that's, if we kind of break it down as a psych project, it's like almost like that's how family can kind of fill in the gaps. Like, we can create connection when there isn't. So I think about my own kids, and I couldn't leave my kids, but like there's moments where, fuck, dude. Sorry, you got me in the heart. Okay, yeah, the thing is, like, right now I'm not with my kids. That's hard. But to do something like that where you like I mean, I can imagine going and like, you know, shooting parts of a movie or shooting a movie, coming home, shooting, you know, like that's real for me. But like to do it permanently is just like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm. As you've been touring, what have been the things that have stuck out to you about what people come up and talk to you about from seeing the movie?
Well, I mean, it's everything. I mean, the movie touches on so many different things, and so there can be people that have abandonment and adoption issues. There can be people who've struggled with various mental health issues. There can just be people who had difficult family situations and family secrets that were going unsaid that were brought up, and I think it just brings a lot of emotion out of people at the screening, and there's a wide variety of responses to the film. Some people connect with Joyce, some people will never forgive Joyce, some people connect more with Jared or Sam depending on how they process emotions and depending on what their childhood traumas were, because we've all had them on some levels. But I mean, there's just so many different connection points. Some people identify with Randy. You know, I think everybody loves Grandma Doris because of the way she is and how forgiving and loving she is. I just want to say one other thing about Minding the Gap, which is as we were getting in the editing process, we watched your Criterion extra features, and there was a moment where you were challenged to put yourself into Minding the Gap or not, and I think that was also a balancing act that we played with Reid. But I just really appreciate the process that you went through with Cartemquin and your collaborators, and where you ultimately landed with Minding the Gap, because the emotional vulnerability and the way that you connected with the people in your family and your friends was just really moving to us and was a huge inspiration for what we are trying to accomplish with Sam Now.
I'm glad it helped, and it kind of made me think about you as a character versus like Reid and IRL. And I didn't know that you had known each other since you were kids. I'm curious, Jason, how have you seen Reid change since then, or has there always been like the essence of Reid? And like, what is Reid now?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I've gotten to see, well, like when we were all about play as kids, so I think there's a part of Reid that's always all about play. And we would play with little toy figures, and we'd set up these like elaborate battle scenes and everything like that. And it was just, and we'd like run around the neighborhood playing hide and seek, and we'd go over to Grandma Doris's house, and we'd make root beer and all this stuff. What's funny is I wasn't around the filmmaking part of them as kids, and I wasn't really making films at that point. And so, like when I ran into Reid, I think the first time we ran into each other, I don't know if we've talked about this, but you were in the neighborhood, and he had his DVX 100 mini DV camera. He's like, I'm shooting interviews, and I didn't even know about like the Joyce thing that was happening. And then, you know, we reconnected, and he was doing these like Super 8 films and doing these film screenings in Seattle with the Sam films and doing live music scores. And it was really inspirational for me, you know, as I was going into my filmmaking, to see what Reid was doing, because I was like, wow, I was kind of a child of the digital revolution, where I was like, oh my God, I can buy a camera, I can edit digitally. Like that was what I embraced. But Reid was like editing on film and hand processing things and like splicing and cutting on film. And so like I saw, you know, and these films were beautiful. And then as the years went on, he was doing higher and higher end work and is a really accomplished cinematographer. We worked together on some projects, and you know, you see it in the film, the evolution of Reid as a filmmaker. And you get to see him from like the earliest era of VHS, and then when things start getting more serious with Super 8 and 16 millimeter, and then the mini DVs, asking more questions, and to the point where we're shooting all this new stuff on airy, you know, beautiful 4K. Anyway, so I mean, I've seen Reid grow up as a filmmaker, and I know I've watched every bit of footage he's ever shot, essentially.
I've watched 1,000 hours of my life.
Yeah, I know so much, you know. But yeah, I mean, that is what drew me to the project, both the personal close friendship, but also just knowing I knew the archive. Like I knew a lot of the archive, and that was like a big challenge, but also a great honor to like work with such beautiful, especially like the Super 8 and the 16 millimeters, but really the whole thing.
Has your friendship ever tested like in the creative process?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
why. That's one of the reasons why I recommend anyone doing a project of this scale to have two editors like we did, because you can burn out one editor and then go to the next one and then burn that one out and then go back and that's the cycle of life.
Yeah, I mean, like, there certainly, like, we'd all get sort of heated. I mean, we were so in this edit. We edited for like 3 years full time, and myself, my editing partner Darren, Reid, and our two co-producers being around, and there is so many different options for how to tell this story and for how to roll out the story and what characters to involve and how much of each one to use, and so many different ways that you could like put the scene before that or after. And you know, Reid's incredibly passionate and is like a director who has like a very, very clear vision, and Darren and I both have opinions and visions too, and there was so much experimentation in the edit there. And I think what's cool is like we could kind of battle and then we come together, and you know, it's always for the sake of making the best possible movie. And I think that was always all of our goals, and we really put ourselves through the ringer to like finesse this cut. I mean, we premiered it at Hot Docs and we edited for 3 months afterwards for the final cut, which was what aired on Independent Lens, because we kind of realized it wasn't quite there yet, and we also had 2.5 extra minutes to hit our broadcast length. And of course, with 25 years of footage, we're gonna use that 2.5 minutes. So
yeah, we worked it. And I also want to say that it's an interesting thing to do a 3-year edit, you know, and with all this personal material. I think one of the things that really helped was like having a conversation really early on in the process about like how it was going to go. And I remember having a conversation with you where it was like, I had just talked to Sam. Sam did not want to be involved in the edit in any way, but he told me, you have to tell this story. Like, it has to come from you. And, you know, he was speaking to me in this way where it was like, okay, like, I know this story, yet at the same time, holding this sort of idea of this language that I've developed with my brother, like, holding that and, like, doing it justice was a nearly impossible task. So I told this to Jason. I was like, I have to hold this, and sometimes, like, the things that I say to do won't make sense to you, but that we just have to do it. And I think that it's that kind of you know, thing that really matters in something like this. It's like the authenticity comes from more than just what's in the documentary. It comes from our fiction, our fantasy, our language and belief system.
Yeah, it's a lot of trust to be able to, you know, ask that of your collaborators. And it's like, basically trust me. Like, there's something there that's like ineffable, I feel like, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll open it up after I'll ask more questions, but get your questions ready. What were the reactions of Sam and Joyce and your
Good
father?
question. Yeah. We'll get. I'll do this. So I didn't show it to any of my family members until it was pretty much done. I showed it to my grandmother, who was losing her vision, before anyone else, because she was losing her vision, and that was like maybe a month before. And then we had a big screening in Seattle for not just the Harkness family, but like our whole community, and it was like a big screening, and the reaction was really receptive. Everyone embraced it. Like, the whole family came up on stage and did Q&A, and Joyce was not there. And I tried in many attempts to offer Joyce ways to watch, and she would say that she wasn't ready, and then ultimately she said, I don't think I ever will be ready. And it was a dilemma for me because I felt like it could be potentially more harmful for her to imagine what it is and maybe hear things from other people than it would be for her to actually see it. So that also took a lot of trust, and just like, that's where she is, and I have to respect that.
And Sam, how did Sam, your father,
Sam, there's a good story to Sam's first watch. He actually watched it at Hot Docs when we premiered for the first time, and he's like, he put it off. Like I gave him like a month in advance to watch. I was like, anytime before, let's watch it. And then he's like, no, I'm gonna watch it at Hot Docs. And then we get there, and we like are down to the wire. It's like we actually have 2 hours before the screening, and he's like, okay, now we're gonna watch it in the hotel room on my laptop. And he's like, I have to let you know before we do this that there's a chance that I might like crawl away into a cave for weeks after watching this. Like, I have no idea what the impact's gonna be. He's like dead serious too, even though he jokes a lot. So we push play. I'm sitting there on this little couch watching it with my brother, and we get to the end. It's like silent. He doesn't say anything the whole time. And then at the end, he's like, "Whoa, phew." And he's just like, I'm glad you kept it messy.
That's great. Are there any questions that people would like to ask? Yes.
What was the scene you wish you could include that ended up on the cutting room floor, and why did you cut it out?
Ugh. Yeah, there's a lot of material. There's a lot of sort of like scenes that were long that turned into tiny scenes. And there's kind of like, man, what's, like some of the stuff, it's like, it's basically like expansion of different characters would have been the thing. Like if there was more time in the movie, it would have been like expanding my dad, expanding Jared. Oh man, is there like were there shots that I was like really fighting for, or that you were?
Well, what I always wanted, Sam 5 is like this epic masterpiece, and Sam plays this pirate, and there's this bully character and a superhero character, and there's all this cool stop motion, and the film's like 25 minutes in and of itself, so I kept like editing versions of it and trying to lay it in as B-roll over things that were happening in like Act 3, and I like just kept trying to figure out how can we get more of Sam 5 in here, and ultimately we barely got any Sam 5 in because it wasn't serving the story. But I mean, it's so good, and we're hopeful that one day we can put all the Sam films together and like release them as their own things, just so people can see how really cool and inventive these films are. I mean, there's tons of scenes that we edited that didn't make the final cut. I mean, there's a scene with Jared, and he decides to try to write a letter to Joyce's mom, birth mom, and it's kind of a reprise of the letter writing scene from earlier, where Reid's like, "Come on, go write a letter." I mean, that was just like a cool thing that didn't make it into the final cut. I mean, but there's just like so much, and other characters that we had to cut out entirely.
Yeah. It really did. We touched on so many themes in the movie, and there's things that like we could have gone further into, like identity, and like Jared and Sam have this sort of complex feeling of like they're part Japanese, but they kind of present white, and so like what does that mean for them, and also just this like kind of secrecy and erasure is sort of a big part of the theme of connection and disconnection. We see that kind of in the adoption story. So yeah, there's a lot more that we could have, like, places we could have gone, yet it was really important, I think, to just, for me, in this story, to stick with the character arc and just be like, what is growth for Sam? So I think that we hit a lot and we packed a lot in, but I had to hold that as the, like, okay, this is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Is there a Sam 7 in there?
Sam 7 will not be made. Well,
if it was a documentary about ultimate frisbee, which Sam is still, like, basically a professional frisbee player. I mean, he always complains that there's not enough frisbee in the movie. You know, like, he would have preferred there to be way more frisbee. He's like, all right, this doesn't really represent all of who I am, because frisbee is such a big part of my life and it's such a small part of the movie. But
I think we should give Sam the opportunity to recut the movie completely.
it would just be ultimate highlights, basically. No, we did have, like, an ultimate frisbee highlight section that we even tried for a little while that, like, took you through time, and it's like a Raging Bull, like, sequence where you're seeing time pass and Sam doing all these ultimate frisbee accomplishments, and then we get to him 10 years later. But we abandoned that and did this sort of jump forward. One of the many things we tried.
Any other questions? Also do the quicker style. You can speak if you feel called to. Yes.
Has this affected, like, you're a dad now, has it affected how you document your kids' lives?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. Has it affected how I document my kids' lives?
Has it? Maybe it hasn't.
Has it or hasn't it? I think if I hadn't have scratched this itch, I probably would, like, be an insane, like, you know, filmer of my kids' lives, but I'm not. I'm a little more average about it, I'd say. And actually, there's a lot of, like, conscious effort where I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna actually. I would rather just see it with my eyes. I'd rather just be there. But you know, the thing that actually strikes me about that question is more to do with without the camera, can I still achieve this sort of joy and play and connection that I've learned in my relationship with my brother? And I think I can.
Your kids did help on an important element of the film, though. Talk about the stop motion.
Oh yeah, we got to, they were my assistants when one of the last things I filmed was the map sequences where the little minivan is driving on the maps, and they were my assistants, and that was super fun because I really was trying to channel again this language, which is just like movie making is fun, and I find a lot of joy from it, and so, like, that bringing the kids into this little garage studio where we filmed it was, like, you know, helped with that.
Is there gonna be have you thought about the moment one day when they're gonna want to see the film, or you're gonna like sort of want to create a moment in which they see the film?
They've all seen it multiple times. River, he's even seen it, but
River's like 4.
he's 3, yeah. And yeah, like, that'll be an interesting moment for River, because River, what is the age that he'll want to, like, really watch it? That'll be interesting. But
Did they give notes?
they have given reactions, yeah. Like, did I ask for notes in early cuts? You know, I feel like there was a moment where maybe an early cut, like, a kid didn't understand something, and it was like, you're right, that should be more clear. And I think that we did work it in, and, you know, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that happened. But yeah, my daughter Doris, who's 12, when she watched it, she was like it was a little bit much for her. She was like, she needed a lot of comfort afterward. The boys that are 12 and 13, they really appreciate it. Wolfie especially was like really into the creativity behind it. Arwen, who's a little older, was he was like a little bit more like, okay, cool, like, you know, but like, and I think he's grown to appreciate it a little bit more actually. Like he's watched it a couple times now and is like starting to like really grasp it. But I think it's a tricky one for people like middle school, like, you know, like but high schoolers, I think that I think they can really grasp it a little bit more.
It's a film that I think portrays two families, I think, that sort of have trouble speaking about emotions. Yet you portray people who have become people who are very articulate about emotion and are quite emotionally intelligent. You know, hearing you speak, and Sam, obviously the work he does, and even Joyce, you know. So like, how do you think that happened?
That's a great question. I feel like the emotional growth that we see in the movie, there's a lot of different factors going on. You know, as we grow, what I've noticed is, especially for men, like I started out in this movie, there's like adventure and, you know, and like laughing and play, and then we start to get into like, you know, like how do we talk about our pain, you know, and that's that switch is tricky, because once you are in this sort of sober world of recognition, can you like still access the other thing, you know? And I found that you know, like Sam and I have had a lot of conversations. We made it a plan going into the latter years from 2015 on, that we would spend at least as much time off camera as talking about the movie, or on camera, or any element of movie making, so that we could really like recognize like our relationship and the difference between what the camera was doing. All that is really to help you see like we're still figuring it out, you know. With growth comes this sort of, you know, wisdom, which also is analytical and, you know, brings into play things that like are inhibitors to connection too. So I do feel like the movie's given me a lot of wisdom, but I also feel like there's things that it's like I still just want to get back and kind of, you know, be in the space where it's just like we don't have to really think too much about it. And I do think that the movie has helped in that way too, where it's like, because there's a really nice record of the events that have happened, it really frees me up, and I think it helps free Sam and Jared up too, to where it's like we've had these conversations, we've gone through this emotional processing. A lot of the elephants are out of the room, and with Joyce, who's also very intellectual, a very smart person, and I respect her own wisdom too, and you know, the growth in her situation is really different. You know, it's like she's basically kind of like rechilding herself too, where it's like she's like trying to like just reclaim some sense of like herself, you know, that she didn't get when she was young. So many different levels. But I love representing the spectrum, you know, like it's like there's intelligence in being naive. There's clearly wisdom in just being, and our connection to our ancestors and the blood that we have in us, and the ways that we know, and that comes out through like movement and play and like doing things and being around each other, like yeah. So it's like holding that, knowing that all of these things are true, and then also trying to get to the place where it's like, can I also forget that and remember that it's just like, I went through that and I put it down in a movie, and now I can live freely.
One more round of applause for the filmmakers. I hope to see you downstairs.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much.
It's really awesome.